4th chapter of Matthew, verses 12 to 23. And in today's gospel reading, Jesus begins a process of acquiring his 12 original apostles, the building blocks for his church. Now, in this gospel reading itself, what I just read, Jesus gathers 4 out of those 12. Jesus also teaches us a very important gift and value about how we should live life. The first thing we want to do is to see how Jesus acquires these 4 apostles. So let's take a look at verse 18, 19, and 20 of the 4th chapter of Matthew. It says in that section, as he, that's third person singular, so that's going to be a reference to Jesus. As Jesus was walking by the Sea of Galilee, he saw 2 brothers. Simon is called Peter. Eventually he'd be the rock of the church, the first pope. And his brother Andrew, casting a net into the sea. They were fishermen. Now he, Jesus, said to them, come after me, and I'll make you fishers of men. At once they left their nets and followed him. So at that point, Jesus has handpicked 2 out of his 12, Simon and his brother Andrew. Now let's take a look at verse 21 and 22 to see how Jesus acquires James and John. Now it says, he, Jesus, walked along from there and saw 2 other brothers, James, the son of Zebedee, and his brother John. Now, when you look at the very beginning part of that, you see the little nuance? It says, he, Jesus, walked along from there. So what we know is this. Moments after Jesus selects Peter and his brother Andrew, then he also acquires James and his brother John. Now, they were in a boat with their father Zebedee, mending their nets. He called them. And immediately they left their boat and their father, and they followed him. Now, Jesus handpicks 4 out of the 12 with an intended 8 to go yet. And what happens is, the second Jesus picked Simon, Jesus had to say to himself, Simon, there's a major problem with Simon. The second Jesus picked Andrew, Jesus had to say, Andrew, there's a major problem with Andrew. The second Jesus picked James, Jesus had to say to himself, James, there is a major problem with James. And the very second Jesus selects John, Jesus had to say, John, there is a major problem with John. What was the major problem with Simon, Andrew, James, and John at this point? What major problem did these 4 fellas possess? Any idea? They all had a major problem. What was it? Well, let's ask this question. Let's put this question up on a wall. The question is this. If the job description to be an apostle meant you had to be perfect, without sin, totally unblemished, how many apostles would Jesus have been able to find? How many? That's it. Let's take a look at the answer. Next slide. 0. 0. You see, the problem with Simon and Andrew, James and John was what? They had one major flaw. They were human beings. You see, when Jesus gathers his 12 apostles eventually, because today we have the story of 4 out of the 12, Jesus knew right then and there was a problem. Jesus had to select apostles from among a group called human beings, and human beings, you and I, were all imperfect. Jesus knew from the very beginning of his church it would be flawed, because it would be run by imperfect human beings. You see, what's amazing is this. Whenever you hear about on the news or read something in a paper about some problem in the church, a problem with its priest or one of its leaders, sometimes we're just taken back by it. I can't believe it. But that shouldn't be that shocking or that surprising. Why? Because the church is maintained and run by what? Imperfect human beings. In human history, if you love history, human history is great. From the very beginning of human civilization, every human institution has been and will always be flawed. Every government from the very beginning of human civilization, every government from the beginning until now and into the future has always and will always be flawed. Every church, be it Catholic or otherwise, every church will always be flawed. Why? Because it's run by human beings. And we're all imperfect. Although disappointing, it should never be shocking because it's just run by people. Some with greater assets than others, some with not the quality of assets than others, but every human being that runs any institution is going to have a problem. I am absolutely positive the place you work, if it's some style of company, although it might run well, but there are 1 or 2 little glitches in the system because it's run by human beings. That's why typically most companies have an HR department. to take care of the difficulties of certain employees. You're always trying to get this one to work. You're trying to get this one to behave. You're trying to get this one to do this. Why? Because they're just human beings. So we spend a lot of money trying to keep the ship upright. Now, Jesus did what? Jesus realized, I have no other choice. I want to develop a church. I'm going to have to use human beings. My church is going to be flawed, but I think my church can do a whole lot of good despite the fact it's going to be really flawed bad and poorly. And that's the challenge for all of us. You know, psychologists say this: if you only want to hang out with family members who are perfect, if you only want friends in your life who are perfect, if you only want to talk to people in your life who are perfect, you are going to be one very lonely person. Because no one in your family is perfect. No one in your life is perfect. No thing that we do is perfect. It might be pretty close to perfect, but it isn't. Your marriage might be pretty close to perfect, but there's always one little part of it that we need to work on. We'll get that tomorrow. Things just aren't always perfect because they're run by human beings. Our quest and our goal is to accept people despite their imperfections. And why should we do that? Why should I accept people in my life despite the fact they're imperfect? Because I want them to accept me into their life because I am imperfect. If people would shun me because I was imperfect, it would be a very difficult world for me. And then for you. You know, there was this little boy, his grandma took him to an amusement park. They're having a great time. Grandma was a fun grandma. Sometimes you get a fun grandma. She was a fun grandma. So they're at the amusement park having a good time. A little boy, they get down into kiddie land. Little boy wants to run the Ferris wheel. And these little girls come up behind the little boy in line. And as he's standing in line, these little girls show up and they start to look at him and laugh and giggle and point. A little boy knew what was going on. You know, this little boy was very self-conscious. He had a lot of freckles on his face. And as they're pointing at him and looking at him and laughing, he knew they were making fun out of his freckles. He felt horrible. He didn't know what to do. He wanted to run away. He's looking around as they're laughing, they're giggling, they're pointing at his freckles, and lo and behold, about 50 feet away, he sees his grandma. Well, he left the line and started running over to Grandma. Grandma, Grandma, he's yelling and crying. Well, Grandma saw him running toward her, so she knelt down on her knees. And he just ran right into her chest. And she grabbed onto him real tight, and he's got these big tears flowing down his face, on his cheeks. They were so big he could flood a river. And Grandma was wiping those tears off of his cheeks and trying to dry his little face. And he keeps crying and screaming. He feels so bad. And Grandma said, "What's wrong?" He said, "Grandma, you see those little girls over there? I was standing in line. They got behind me. And they started to point at me and making fun out of my freckles." And Grandma was wiping his tears from his cheeks. And she said, "Oh." She said, "Your freckles, well, they're perfect. When God made you, he put every freckle in the right spot. They're perfect, your freckles. Well, I don't think there's anything more pretty in the face of this earth than your freckles." And he looked at his grandma and said, "Oh, Grandma, there's one thing in this world prettier than my freckles." And she said, "What?" And he looked at her with all the love in his eyes and he said, "Grandma, your wrinkles." Whether or not Grandma viewed her wrinkles as a sign of age and imperfection, clearly the little boy looked at his freckles as a sign of imperfection. But when Grandma looked at his imperfect freckles, and he looked at Grandma's wrinkles, did he see any problems, any mistakes? No. When she looked at him, she saw perfection, although he did not. When he looked at Grandma, he saw perfection, although she did not. You see, the quest and goal in life is to accept people in our lives despite their imperfections. If you're in a process of wanting to get married or wanting to ask someone to marry you and you're upset about There are several imperfections that they have, and you're disappointed that they do several things that you don't like. Well, you can wait it out, but it's probably never going to happen, because there's never going to be anyone that you can marry that is totally always going to be a flaw in their life. And Jesus realized that. Jesus wanted to start a church, so he said, I have no other choice. I have to get human. I'm the guy that created these human beings. And I gave them free will, and with that, I gave them the possibility to be imperfect, and they have never let me down. Because from the beginning of my church all the way to now, some 2,000 years later, my church has been riddled with imperfection and scandal and stories. Why? Because human beings have been running it. What am I going to do? But despite all that, so much good has occurred, because I took a chance on accepting imperfection in other people. That's really the challenge for all of us, to accept people, despite who they are, what they are, and how they are. Because if you wait around only to appreciate, enjoy family members who are perfect and friends who are perfect, you're going to be one really lonely person. We're all imperfect. We have to find a way in our lives to love those who are imperfect, and to appreciate the freckles and the wrinkles and those in front of us. Because when you love someone, you no longer see what they claim might be an imperfection. You see their wrinkle and their freckle as something that is beautiful, not something that's a disaster.